Thanks, listeners, for joining us. Today's edition of our radio show, Elko Live, is a discussion with the Elko School Superintendent and the Chief Financial Officer for the Elko County School District. CJ Anderson, our superintendent, has brought Cassie Stahlke today. And CJ, we're going to talk all about the budget, and it's an important talk that we need to have. We appreciate you making some time. We are recording this session just to accommodate schedules. So thank you for being on the program and bringing Cassie today, CJ.
Of course, very happy to be here, and totally agree with you. Very important conversation, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about it and with an opportunity to give clear facts and logically process through what's happening, as opposed to, reacting to things we hear sometimes.
Yes, definitely. This is what this program is for. Cassie Stahlke, thank you so much, Cassie, for being on the program. You're most comfortable crunching these numbers, working behind the scenes, hard at work, year-round on the budget. So we appreciate your coming on to talk about this the financial woes we find ourselves in today.
Thank you for inviting me, Lori. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we'll start off with you, CJ, just talking about the basic scenario. I think what's going around is the worst of the worst, in that we are depleting our general fund. We're not the only school district in Nevada that this has happened to. I understand Douglas has had the same situation. We are not the only school district, even nationwide, facing financial woes. So we'll just start with the concept of, is this some sort of mismanagement of school funds?
Yeah, so, my answer to that is absolutely not. In retrospect, especially, hindsight being 2020, you can look back and say, oh man, if we had done this differently 3 years ago, or if we had done this with the infusion of funds from, the government's or the governor's infusion a few years back, then would this be different today? And so that's it's not really productive to talk about what could have been done differently in the past. But what I think is important is to point out that the funds depleting in the general fund, it's not because of mismanagement of money. At least from my perspective, it isn't. It's not from not being aware of what you have and just like someone spending with their debit card without an awareness of what's in their checking account. It's not like that. Rather, it's there's a kind of a convergence of different things that make it difficult for other funds to sustain themselves, and so the general fund has to go to support those things. And all the while, you're trying to make cuts in different places, but when those don't keep up with the efforts you're making, then that's what deficit spending is, right? But it's not deficit spending in paying for exorbitant things that you don't need. It's nothing like that.
So Cassie, I think what the superintendent is describing is that there are fixed costs, but we have declining revenues. Is that a fair assessment?
That's completely accurate. The way that our new pupil-centered funding plan works in the state of Nevada, which was implemented about 5 years ago, is that our revenues now are based on student enrollment. And we have a quarterly audit, so every quarter our enrollment is compared to the previous year, and then based on if that number increases or decreases, we then either owe the state money back or we get additional funds. Elko County School District has been in the place where we have been losing revenue every year, and it's been close to about $2 million a year since the plan has become in place. Mm-hmm. An additional factor with that is our local revenues used to stay local, and now with the plan, everything is distributed up to the state, and we faced a major cut when this happened with our net proceeds of mines, and Eureka was also in that situation as well. We used to receive about $5 to $7 million a year, and now that goes up to the state, and then it's redistributed to the entire state. So with that, the new funding plan, as well as the enrollment, we're facing a loss of revenue. Also, every year we have increased costs due to inflation, and like Superintendent Anderson said, we've lost all of our COVID relief funds, which has been a huge hit as well.
And this is something that, as the CFO, you've been reporting to school trustees. The community has, certainly the school community has been aware of it. And I did want to point out that anybody who listens to this program with any regularity knows that both the city and the county of Elko are in the same situation. We have declining revenue. We also understand higher education in rural Nevada, that includes Great Basin College, has also experienced declining revenue for several years, again, because of this distribution. So how much, Cassie, I think you just said $2 million. We heard at the school board meeting on Tuesday, that we are looking to find, between $8 and $9 million over the next few months?
So far, just within our current, just the small group of administration, we've found about $4 million in cuts that we can easily make that doesn't directly impact students. Right now, we're looking to form a committee, we're in the beginning stages, and it wasn't approved upon about the board. It's us taking that proactive approach to it. And we have multiple ideas. It can be something small from small department changes, or it could be the extreme, as what was stated at the board meeting, to school consolidation. But like I said, that is an extreme measure. So we could start looking at departments, maybe cutting 10%. We can start looking at transportation or our textbook adoption. Also just some of the programs we use, and on, not filling positions through attrition. But those are just some of the ideas that we have. And yes, it would be about almost $8 million additional, 8 to 9. Okay,
so we're hearing the news that about $4 million has been found, at least so far. This is all stopgap measure, though. This is temporary. This doesn't address if we do continue to have declining enrollment. So, CJ, it sounds like what Cassie's describing is that every student in Nevada, K through 12, public schools, charter schools alike, the same amount is funded per pupil. Is that the distribution?
Yeah, so there's a base per pupil funding, which at this current time is somewhere in the 11,700-ish range per kid. I don't have the exact dollar, but
we're still among the lowest in the nation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not sufficient in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so every kid that's the way you think about it. Is for every student you have enrolled, you get you get that per pupil amount given to you. Now, it's not like those dollars have to follow those kids to a school necessarily. In fact, it can't be that way for us because we have schools that cost anywhere from 2/3 to double the amount that it costs to run another school, right? Like to run a school out on Jackpot or run a school out on Owyhee or even Wendover, and especially our little 2-room rural schoolhouses in Mound Valley and Ruby Valley and Independence Valley and Montello. Those cost so much more per student to run. And so the state allocates that per pupil funding to us based on that number of kids. And then it's up to us to decide how those get dispersed in order to run each school. In addition to that per pupil funding, there are also categorical funds such as special education, such as at-risk, gifted and talented,
transportation, food service, and then there's also a different weight for every county. So there's a cost of education index that takes into account where we live. It's never enough. So like what CJ was saying, for example, an Owyhee student costs about almost $19,000 per student, whereas a student at Elko High School or within the city, Elko and Spring Creek, is about $14,000. And right now we only receive about $11,600 per student.
Right. So these are the realities, again, of a state-funded formula. And again, among the biggest factor is the declining enrollment, of which we're going to talk about as well. But Cassie, isn't there something known as hold harmless? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
There is a hold harmless provision. So they look at our enrollment every quarter and they compare it to the previous quarter. If our enrollment has declined more than 5% in that quarter, then we'll receive the same amount of funding and they won't drop our revenues. For the majority of the counties, the LEAs, not including the charter schools, everybody on average has remained about 3 to 4%. So we're constantly in this reactive mode of we're having to pay back money in these true-ups, where we're still losing that enrollment, we're still losing that revenue, and having to be reactive to the situation, and then continue on. So we've noticed that the 5% technically isn't unless you have a large influx of students that are either coming or going. But still, 4% of our enrollment is quite a bit. So if you think per quarter, if we're losing about $250,000, it's hard for a school district when the majority of our expenses are purely fixed. The majority of our expenses are payroll, and our teachers have already signed contracts. So if we're getting through the year and we're losing $1 million, it's nearly impossible for us to stop everything and determine how we can cut, because the majority of our programs, textbooks, and salaries have already been paid for. Also, our fixed costs go into our transportation, our food service, and our insurance fund as well, which we have to provide all of those services.
Right, and that's also on the list to talk about as drivers for declining revenue. So CJ, our school superintendent, CJ Anderson, where are the students going? I mean, we've seen pretty dramatic drop over the last 3 years from over 10,000 students now to we're just above 9,000. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's a little more nuanced than that, but yeah, we're somewhere over 9,000. The challenge is with that is we actually don't get funded for every student that is enrolled for us, not to the full extent.
Not the online students, or
our students who are early childhood, we don't get funded for them the same way that we do for your regular the most of your students. The same goes for any adult ed students that we educate. We don't receive the same type of funding for them. So that we do have a higher enrollment than what we are than what we're actually funded for, and that is almost always the case, and it is rather confusing because sometimes it's a hundreds of student kind of difference, like a 200 to 300 student difference. So you look at that and you think, oh well, 11,000 whatever times another 200 to 300 kids is this much money, but you're not actually going to get that. The state, if they give any funding towards those things, it's very limited and it's for very specific purposes, and so we can't just that can't go into the pot to help out. So it stands to reason that most of these students that have been leaving, and we ask every time, we ask where you, in fact we have to ask, we're supposed to be tracking those, and that goes into the larger conversation of graduation rates and things like that. That's all part of the equation, but we try to find out as best we can, but it is the family's prerogative to tell us what they're doing. And now technically, according to Nevada revised statute, if someone is going to homeschool, then if they live within our district boundaries, they have to provide us with a plan of education for that student. And so provided that someone does give us a notice of intent to homeschool and they give us the plan and it gets signed off on, so to speak, then we know that that's going to homeschool. Sometimes people let us know they're transferring to whatever school in whatever other county or state if they leave the state of Nevada, or if they're going to this online program. So those are supposed to be tracked as best as possible, but there are also plenty of times when people just drop off the map and you don't know, and so we try to do our best to find that out. But both my gut and just from what we do know is I think a lot of people are exercising the opportunity to have something more catered and carried out to their home environment, whether that's actual delivery of content at home from a parent to a child or putting their child on an online program. I think many people are exercising that as it provides more flexibility for them. We also did have, and I don't think this is to a huge extent, but in the recent past, the EIAA did double their enrollments there at their school by expanding each grade level. And then just this school year, we did have the Classical Academy that opened their doors for their few grade levels that they have. And so certainly a certain number of students are going to those schools, but that doesn't, those numbers don't represent even close to the number of kids we've lost over the last 3 years.
Yeah, I think in total between the two schools, it's about 500 students, if that. So, but charter schools, that's an important part of this discussion because the Elko County School District still administers charter schools, right, CJ? Is there some accountability? The charter schools have no accountability to the school district?
Not to us, no. So within the state, there are two types of charter schools. There are district-sponsored charter schools, and then there's the state charter school authority. And so in both cases for Elko County with the EIAA and the Classical Academy, they are part of the state charter authority and not the school district.
So they just get the same per pupil allocation as the Elko County School District?
So I'm not really comfortable
Okay.
to speak in a position of their funding and how that works.
It depends on their, like the student groups and their whole formula. So everybody
Okay.
has different variables within the formula. So it's probably very close, but it's probably not the exact same as ours.
Yeah, we're hearing that in Elko, they're tuition-free schools, but that some parents have said that they feel pressured to make contributions. But again, that's not something that we're here to discuss today, but it's just the reality of funding public education, if you will. So, so again, declining enrollments, we are seeing different comments online, wildly, accusational comments about why students leave, why schools aren't meeting student needs, that kind of thing. But it's probably important just to stick to the facts. What we do know, CJ, and that with both Cassie, Stahlke here too, that some of these drivers, you mentioned insurance, the cost of insurance, the cost of school lunches, the cost of special education, right?
Correct.
Okay.
We have a maintenance of effort law in place, and it's for everybody in the state, but technically we cannot fund special ed lower than we did the previous year. So even if we have, like in this case, a budget cut or anything else, we have to ensure that our expenses initially meet the prior year or actually exceed. And I think CJ can probably speak more to this, but from what I've heard within our meetings, we have an increase in the number of students who actually have IEPs and need additional SPED services. We only receive so much money for our SPED department from the state. So right now, the general fund has actually been having to contribute about an additional like $4 to $6 million per year to ensure that we're funding these students and meeting all their needs.
And then we have an outstanding balance on school lunches. Is that true, Cassie? Or are you just projecting into the future for school lunch?
So we've always had to subsidize the school lunch program even before the state actually offered free lunches. Last year was the first year that kids had to actually pay for lunches again that didn't qualify for free and reduced lunch. So we weren't quite sure what that was going to look like. We knew that we were going to have declining participation. I think it was a little bit more than what we actually expected. So even though if somebody was providing lunch, the actual amount of money that comes in isn't going to cover the labor, the food costs, everything else that goes into that equation. So the district's always supplemented. But now that we're coming out of COVID and we're not seeing those state funds anymore, we're actually having to supplement a little bit more.
Yeah, kind of the writing in the contract when you work with a food service provider like SFE in the last few years and then Chartwell's now is you sort of create this projection on what's going to happen, right? And they say, well, if you have this many students that are enrolled and people participate at such a rate, and these are the prices of the meals, we project that we would get X amount of revenue over the year, and you would, and this would cover the total cost, and you would end up with anywhere from break even to, a maximum of whatever that you'd have to supplement with, and that's fine. In an ideal environment to your food service program, you neither make nor lose money. We don't want to profit off of kids eating lunch. We want to break even there, and that's what you're trying to do when you're running a food service program. Is how do we project accurately enough that we can just break even and we can feed these kids, this company can get paid, and we don't lose any money off of it. So the likelihood of ever being at that zero is pretty tough, especially since it's all based off of projected enrollment and participation rates by kids, because we can neither know for sure how many kids we're going to have, nor can we know if families are going to send their kids with lunch or buy lunch that day,
or if they're going hungry. Even
in my own house, I don't know. Like it'll be like my son will be like, I want to get whatever today, and my wife's like, okay, we'll get that for you, right? But the school doesn't know if CJ's kid is going to eat school lunch one day or 3 days or no days that week.
The cost is fixed.
But the cost is fixed, absolutely. Right. So food service is another tough one that you're doing a lot of projections on.
And then Cassie, our Elko County School District insurance for the employees, it is a self-funded plan, and we did start seeing changes, more use, for example, as we were discussing just before we went on the air, during COVID, right? So this has also been an erosion of the balance, I guess, of the money available for the self-insurance.
Correct. And I think every local government you're in a predicament when you have so many employees, you kind of play a gamble, and you can either go fully funded, or you basically have a contract with your insurance company and the price is a set price, or else you're self-funded. Whereas for the number of employees we have, if we just get a contract, that's what it is. With self-funded insurance, for those that may not know, we determine the premium, and the district pays the premium for all of our employees. And over the years, we haven't increased that amount that we've budgeted, and nor has it been increased for dependent premiums as well. So we play a game every year where it's basically, we think that this is going to be our revenues coming in from our monthly premiums, and we hope that our claims stay within that amount to balance. If we have years like within COVID where we have multiple claims, or if there's multiple testing or anything else that's going on, if we have just a few employees that, tragically maybe have cancer or other treatments, those claims that come in are extremely high, and that's where we have to pay those. We do have stop loss insurance where it's capped out, but we may not know one year or the next where our claims are going to be. So during COVID, we definitely had to use COVID funds to help with our insurance plan. But like I said, just over the years, we haven't really been proactive with making changes to our plan as insurance costs or prescription costs have increased. Just reading the other day, we're expecting that insurance costs are going to increase another 13% into the next year.
And we're hearing about these insurance costs nationwide for people employed in all kinds of different industries, and whether they get state-funded plans. And so that brings us to another type of insurance, Cassie, and that's the Public Employees Retirement System, known as PERS, right? And the School Board of Trustees President or Chairman Matt McCarty brought that up during the Tuesday meeting, that maybe it's time to look at changing that distribution, right?
We don't necessarily have the power of that. That's our state pension system that all local governments fall under. We have certain categories or classifications of employees. So like our certified staff, we pay 100% of their PERS. And I want to say, and I'm sorry if I don't remember, I want to say it's 36% of whatever their salary is at this point. We're lucky that we're not state fire or city fire or police, because they're at 50%. But we also have other employees that are employer paid. So the employee pays half of their pension monthly contribution, and then the employer pays. So where Matt McCarty was referring to, where we could absorb some of that, was within those. So next, let's say that the pension system increases that percentage in the next couple of years. We could say that the employee would reduce their salary by whatever that increase was, and then we would make our contribution to it. And some entities do that, but in our case, we've always have absorbed the total increase for the employer. But for the majority of our staff, we pay the full pension, and that's non-negotiable.
Cassie Stahlke is the Chief Financial Officer for the Elko County School District, alongside School Superintendent C.J. Anderson today. We were talking about the drivers for the budget woes that the school district is currently facing, an $8 million shortage just in looking over immediate budget cuts. About $4 million has been recognized, but it's a stopgap measure. And CJ, we obviously wanted to address the concerns as much as we can, because so much is unknown in the future. Some of the most extreme remedies were suggested during Tuesday's school board meeting, and I think that's what's got the community worried. There were specific schools named that could be closed, certainly looking at, I think it was 89 or so layoffs potential. Those were extremes, though, we understand.
Yeah, so very important to that is, Cassie referenced earlier, this committee we're putting together, and this is a committee that's meant to, it's going to be well represented by all of our union leaderships. It's going to have folks from district leadership, as well as some notable community members who can contribute to the conversation. And the idea with that committee is to really look at and pursue kind of brainstorming and going down thought processes of really almost every imaginable option that we can look at to try to make things better. Which includes, as Cassie kind of mentioned, some of the smaller ones, and then she also mentioned those extremes. And so I think that those things were brought up, the specific names of schools and stuff by our board president, and they were brought up not to dictate what's going to happen because no one board member can do that, right? It's silly to think that is a representation of what is going to happen. It was more of an example, which I think was then taken out of context by many people, and I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but anyone who talks about that outside of the context of what the conversation was is simply spreading misinformation, right? And the real information is a committee is being convened, and that committee is going to consider many things. And I think the reason that sometimes some people's thoughts go directly to those extreme measures is because in our budget, as Cassie explained, is that the vast majority of those costs are fixed, and the vast majority of those fixed costs are our employee base, right? And so we have been for the last 3 years, 3 to 4 years really, looking for all these other kind of ancillary and simpler ways to trim things out from the budget, because this isn't for anyone who's been paying attention to our board meetings across the 4 years. We have not been claiming amazing financial stability for the last 4 years. We've been very cognizant of our self-insurance fund being a problem. We've been very cognizant of the way the people-centered funding plan has been affecting us. Every single board meeting agenda has an enrollment report, and you will see lots of red on the enrollment report, which shows declining enrollments little by little throughout the year. And so these things have been very transparently made aware, and I think the miracle that we've made it to this point without making all these other changes is a tribute to both Julie before Cassie got here and then Cassie here. Is there have been lots of creative measures already taken in order to try to trim things out to not impact a child's classroom, to not impact a teacher and their family's well-being and their financial stability at home. There have been so many efforts made, pretty nonstop over the last 3 to 4 years to do all we can to mitigate and to get to this point. But this sort of smoke signal has been coming up for years to say it's bad. The state's funding formula isn't working. It's not getting us what we need, right? And but we're doing everything we can because that's what we do. We just try to find every possible way we can to keep it going because our kids need classrooms to be in, they need lunches to eat, they need buses to get to school on, and we do all those things. But this has been sort of it's felt like a little bit of an inevitability since basically the funding formula changed, and we know that's not just for us. You referenced another school district. I was just at the the NASB conference. Sorry, I almost referenced the wrong association, the Nevada Association of School Boards, with some of our school board members. And at that conference, I was in conversations with multiple superintendents from other districts. And when Cassie talked to the Department of Taxation, we became aware that, we're not in this boat alone. And I'm not going to call out other school districts and speak to their situations, but I know that this is happening to other people. And some people were probably in just a better financial position when this started happening and have been able to kind of push this off as long as they can. But I think unless something changes, you're going to find more and more people that find themselves in this boat.
It's creeping up. And Cassie, it looks like you wanted to add to that. Obviously, you have an association of CFOs. There are 17 school districts throughout Nevada. These are each county has its own school district. And so as CJ just explained, there are various stages of this poverty, if you will. And so what are some of the solutions on the horizon? What are people talking about?
I think right now we're all taking small little mitigational measures and making changes within our budget to try to just sustain throughout the year. But we're really looking right now where it comes down to, it's at the state level, and we rely on our Commission of School Funding that's composed of some senators as well as CFOs. There's some local community members as well, but they're tasked by the legislature to continually look at the funding formula and determine where it can be changed. Luckily, I have been placed on that committee, so I can represent the rural counties, because we have Nye County, Elko County, and then it's Clark and Washoe on there right now. But just between, even though Nye and Elko were both rural, we're both very different in the same sense. Mm-hmm. And we're extremely different from Clark and Washoe. But that's where it comes down to, is that I know at the board meeting it was said, like, can the community do something? But it really comes down to being at the state level and changes from there as well. I think another thing I wanted to point out too is, I know that our communities thought within this tax levy that we finally received this year, it's not quite clear to some people where that tax revenue is going. And it was brought up at our board meeting that tax levy goes to our capital improvement fund. That is a completely different set of money than our general fund that cannot be used to help sustain our school or provide instructional support either. So though we are receiving that small $5 million every year, we're not able to actually use that to get us out of the hole either.
I know County Commissioner Delmo Andriozzi talked about that on last Wednesday's show, in that, the way that the wealth is distributed, Elko County is also experiencing declining revenue, and they're looking forward to about $2.5 million. I think that they'll have something like $20 million in their capital fund, from what he described. And as you just described, we could do a whole other half an hour on the Capital Schools Fund. You have a meeting Thursday afternoon, the 11th at 4:30, which is a public session. I noticed, CJ, I don't think there's a single exciting project on that list. It's all maintenance, deferred maintenance, heating, cooling, all the different things that are proposed. It's all concrete work, for example.
Yeah, which is consistent with what I said earlier about, despite the fact that our general fund is declining, it's not because we're buying the fanciest program or the most beautiful textbooks and accompanying resources. It's not because we're doing anything extravagant. All of our expenditures are very standard and normal for what you would need to operate a school, and the same goes for our capital projects. And I know we don't need to talk about capital specifically, but the point I love that we're highlighting right now, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, is there are certain funds that are discretionary for us, and we can do what we need to with them, and we can manage them as necessary to keep our schools running. But there is so much money that we do not really, there are very specific purposes for those, and short of, saying, well, to heck with that, and using it for what you want, and then being punished for it down the line, and then no longer being able to get those types of funds, which would be, you want to talk about irresponsible, that would be irresponsible for us to look at this scenario and say, well, desperate times, desperate measures, we're just going to use that for this. That would be catastrophic, and we would then lose even more funding going down the line. So there are pots of funding that we have no choice but to do what, X thing with, because that's what they're designated for. And so what we're finding is not only are we doing that and doing it appropriately, but that funding in and of itself oftentimes is not enough for the thing that it's designated for, which means that we are now using these discretionary funds to cover for those things. And that's the SPED we talked about earlier. That's at-risk funding. It's all these other things that what we're getting is just simply not enough. And it's I don't say that to sound ungrateful. I say that from a standpoint of, I know how much it costs to run a school, and the money we're getting is not enough to run all of our schools. And so we're doing the best we can, and we're trying to make adjustments where they're needed. But as we sit here and talk about these things, and they're tough. They're not fun to deal with. But I also think it's important to, in the reporting of things and in the conversation of things, what's also not great is a sentiment of doom and gloom, and this idea that, well, it's all falling apart, and large font with big exclamation points, like that's that's not a solution to a problem, right? You don't. Most problems don't get fixed by yelling about them. Problems get fixed by people coming together and brainstorming and putting wisdom into a bigger wisdom, and you make good decisions off that. And so from that standpoint, even though this is not like super fun to talk about and to deal with, I'm actually, the same, and maybe shame on me for being this way, but I'm the same optimistic self I always am, because I know that as we work together and we come up with solutions, even if some of those do represent difficult decisions, because that often is the case when you have to make large scale decisions like this, there could be a decision that's made that is terribly difficult for someone to deal with, or for people to adjust to. But none of those decisions get made lightly, and they won't be made unilaterally either. So many people will be part of this, and there will be many conversations. And I know that the more people that put off the finger pointing and the accusations and the armchair quarterback kind of perspective to it, and switch that into and engage in the process and see how we can help make this better, the better the solution's going to be. And so, that's my hope, is that, if you love your community and you want things to be in a better shape, then ask how you can help, and with that invitation to people to see how they can help is, in reading through some of the comments, and I didn't spend too much time doing that because why? But in looking through that, I think there is a lot of confusion, which, one, I'm glad we have this opportunity, but I know not every person listens to a radio, or not every person reads a newspaper, or not every person does anything other than just react to what they hear from other people.
Yeah, they're too busy online. Yeah. Yes.
Or just with their lives too.
Yes.
Like people are, I've talked to some folks who are like, what's going on? And I'm like, it's my entire life, but it's not theirs. Mm-hmm. But what I would say, and it's an open invitation, and Cassie's always been this way, and I've always been this way. Like, if someone doesn't understand what's going on and has questions and wants to know, there isn't a newspaper article out there that's going to help answer those questions for you. There isn't someone from outside the district, probably, or outside of this whole landscape of things in the state, that's going to be able to answer those questions for you. If you truly want to know, and you really want to get an understanding for it, because we can't cover it all in 30 or 40 minutes of a radio show, right? Like, it's so much more complex than that. We are open, we are transparent, we are happy to accommodate, to talk with people and answer those questions as best we can. And we have a transparent portal on our website, and it's been there for years. And every little bit of how we've got to here has been on that portal for anyone to see and anyone to talk about, anyone to ask questions about. And it's remarkably complex, but so complex that I needed to bring someone with me today, because I can't know everything about everything, right? And
mm-hmm.
and I'm sure she would say the same thing, like, well, I don't know everything about everything either, and that's why, going back to my point earlier, you got to get people together, because we can't know everything individually, but we can collectively work together to know what we got to do.
So more to come on this. Obviously, a committee is being formed. This will come together pretty quickly. We'll be reporting on it. I know you'll come on your regular radio show. You do a YouTube update after every school board meeting, CJ. And then Cassie, I just want to make sure we got to all of the things you were hoping to explain today as well. We really appreciate your being here.
Thank you. I think I voiced everything that I needed to.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you'll come back. This will be an ongoing community topic for us. CJ, thank you very much. CJ Anderson is our school superintendent. Cassie Stahlke is the chief financial officer for the Elko County School District.